Hello, everyone. Today I have with me Alison Foy, coach and speaker, and a wonderful person. Hello, Alison. Thanks for being here.
Hi, so nice to be here. Hi, everybody.
So let's start with you telling us a little bit about yourself and the work that you do.
Yeah, so I am a coach and speaker, like Anne said, and I would say my journey started when I first did a holistic health practitioner program. So I am a holistic practitioner, and that's where I started to really recognize the kind of like mind body connection. And so I started studying psychology. I have a background in psychology, as well as something called neuro linguistic programming. And that's a therapy that really helps you understand like how the thoughts that you think and the beliefs that you have about yourself really affect the way um, that you live your life, the behaviors that you have, or the reactions that you have. And so that was something that helped me at certain times of my life. And I decided to become trained in that. And I work primarily with youth and adults who want to manage their anxiety and kind of like get back into the driver's seat of their lives. Um, I also work in the school systems a lot, both public and private, talking about these topics. And my goal really is just to help individuals. Usually, I work with women of different ages and youth, but to really build their confidence back up and just their self-worth in general and trust themselves as they move forward in life and making these decisions. So I'm really happy to be here today and talk about those kinds of things. And yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Yeah, and I'm excited to talk about this because our mental health has definitely, and our mindset has definitely changed in the last few weeks. So we're recording this
Yeah.
during physical distancing of COVID-19, and
Yeah.
there's so much that's come up for people because the rug has been pulled from under their feet. For their normal
Yeah.
day-to-day life has changed, their social interactions have changed. So what are you noticing in the people that you speak to, whether they're clients or the people
Mhm.
in your life? How has their mental health and mindset been affecting them, and what are the trends that you're noticing with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say it's really unique to the person. I think that I've been one of those people that go on social media and I've been seeing all these memes, right? Like, people are finding humor in the things that are a little bit uncomfortable for them. And I think one of the big things is some people are having a response to this where they're just really, really down in the dumps. They don't want to do anything, they're not motivated. And then some people have no other choice to just like really push through, kind of deny their own needs right now because they're working from home and they have kids and um, have to do all of these things and want to make sure that their family life and everything doesn't fall apart. And so there's really these two different perspectives. And what I realized talking to people and in my own responses was this is kind of like a big trauma response for people. There's either the fighters who are like, yeah, I'm out of here. Like, I'm going to watch TV for 3 days or, sit on my couch and cry. And I was one of those people, like,
I've definitely done that for a little bit. Yeah.
yeah, I was like, whatever, like, this is what I need to do right now. And I'll get into that in a bit. But then there's the other people who I've been talking to who are like, you know what, I'm so wired up because there's so much stress and so much overwhelm that are having trouble sleeping or having trouble calming themselves down and are experiencing this very, very heightened anxiety. Um, and it shows up as insomnia or it shows up as taking it out on family members or friends and just this real anger. Um, and so I showed up on my Instagram. I believe it was this week or last week. I don't even know like what day it is at the time, but I just kind of explained this to people because it doesn't matter which way you're reacting to it. It both of them are normal. Both of them are real trauma responses. And this is a traumatic event that happened to all of us, like you said. It's totally taken us out of our routine, totally put us in um, a place where it's almost like we're forced to think about things that we usually distract ourselves from, and we're usually busy doing all of these different things and taking care of people, and here we are with ourselves. And you know it's a very interesting time.
For sure. And for me personally, and I know I've talked to a lot of people as well, so the two
Yeah,
kind of different camps that you're talking about, I've definitely gone through both. And then
yeah,
also like
yeah,
been really stable in the middle.
yeah,
So it's kind of been like a roller coaster, and we see that with depression and anxiety in general too, right?
yeah,
Like they
yeah,
coexist. It's you're super anxious, and then
exactly,
you usually crash, and then the cycle starts again. So I'm
yeah,
finding there's been a lot of that, and for me personally, like I took 2 days, like full days off this weekend. And this week I
yeah,
feel so much more settled. And I think also just general acceptance of the way life is right now. Because the first 2 weeks,
yeah,
it was
for
like
sure.
such a significant change, right? So, what kind of
Yeah,
strategies
very
are you
uncomfortable.
implementing in your life, or what kind of tools have you been using to help yourself through this time?
I would say when we're in those moments of whatever we're feeling, the biggest the key to this, like navigating these emotions, is just to allow them. And I think that we're so used to thinking, oh my gosh, I am feeling down, or I'm feeling anxious, or I'm feeling angry. I should be feeling like this, or this person's fine, and I have to be strong for these people in my life. And we can't actually work through them unless we allow ourselves to be present with them. And so it is a roller coaster. And not only that, there's a large grieving process that's going on for a lot of people when they're realizing different things are not happening, things that they were looking forward to, or um, just accepting the way that life is now. So I would say, what does allowing look like for people? I typically say anything that you can do to be present with yourself. And so for me, that's looked like journaling, or that's looked like writing a letter to myself or people that I'm frustrated with right now, or whatever is going on for me, expressing it in some way. And so that's what I recommend to my clients. And I had a conversation with someone yesterday who was just so beside themselves, incredibly anxious and really angry just at the world, angry at her coworkers, angry at everything. And, oftentimes we have these really big emotions and we're like, okay, now what? Like, great, I'm aware of it. Anger specifically is a tough one to get out because as women, um, it's hard to like get in touch with them. We go almost right to forgiveness sometimes, and it's really about empowering ourselves to take these moments to really feel the feelings. And so, if um, some of you are watching, are like, yeah, that's me. I'm like so angry right now. I always suggest, in a healthy way, just like punching your pillows and like screaming into your pillows. Sometimes you need that physical release. Like I said, there's writing letters, or just really any way to get it out of the body, because as we know, the body holds on to stress. And so if we just deny it and we go, okay, like, you know what, I'm just going to watch TV or whatever, that's great. Yeah, we might feel better, but we're actually still holding it inside. And so I'm a really big advocate for expression, and there's many different ways. It's very unique and intuitive. So yeah, those are
Yeah.
some things.
Yeah, and anger is definitely one of those things, right? Like a lot of us hold on to it and then it seeps through in other ways,
Yeah,
right? Like the passive aggressiveness comes out for
yeah,
a lot of women. But yeah, same as you. I often recommend like going to a kickboxing class, or punching
yes,
your pillow, or getting into your car and screaming in the car if you don't want to do that at home
yeah.
around people,
Cars
or
are
going.
great.
Going for a run, if you're a runner, or if you like running. Don't do it if you don't
Yeah,
like that. I'm not one of those people. Or
yeah,
even writing a letter and then burning it or ripping it, something a little bit more physical. I love those
yeah,
strategies because I know they've been super helpful for me, because anger is a normal emotion, right? Sometimes we
yeah,
forget about
exactly.
that. We've been
Yeah,
sometimes we think that, we shouldn't get angry, but anger is
Uh,
totally normal.
yeah,
So, yeah.
it's the
Um,
shoulds that
yeah,
remind us that, well, they just, it's when we get caught up in our heads, right? And we compare ourselves or think that we, um, should be fine and not experiencing this. And that's when we have to remind ourselves that we're human and emotions, any kind of emotions, are normal. Like, and somewhere along the way, that messaging got mixed up somehow. But
for
yeah, I
sure.
love those strategies as well.
Yeah. Can we talk about this word should?
Yes.
So, where do these ideas come from when we talk about I should do this, I
Right.
should do that? Where do these come from, and like how does that impact the way we perceive ourselves, life, and others?
Right. So I talk about this when I go to the schools. We talk about mental health, just on a bigger spectrum. And there's a lot of parts to it, but one of the big parts is societal. And so for example, when I was growing up, and I know when my parents were growing up, there was kind of this mentality that vulnerability was a weakness. And you probably heard this, like, be seen and not heard, and all of these things. And so society, compared to back then versus now, where we're openly talking about these things and we're seeing vulnerability and emotions as strengths, are very, very different. And so some of us still hold on to those beliefs from childhood, when we were maybe scolded by a parent, or just like disregarded of having our feelings as being normal. And so we grow up thinking, I have to be strong, and that means that I can't be emotional. And so I know for me, this was my experience. I grew up in a household with my dad being like, yeah, we'll just shove that under the rug and we don't talk about any problems, right? And that happens to a lot of people. But those beliefs about emotions and just mental health in general come from previous generations. And now we're kind of evolving into this place where it's okay to talk about, and there's awareness in all of these things. And it's having that awareness when those beliefs come up, and reminding yourself, like, okay, that's an old belief, and it's okay for me to experience what I'm experiencing and express that to people. And maybe that gives some perspective to different reactions. Some people are still caught up in that old mindset, right? Where it's uncomfortable to talk about feelings. And some people have moved past that and are okay with expressing. And it's okay to be on whatever end of those two spectrums. It's just allowing ourselves to learn that, maybe my parent, when I talk to them about my feelings, is not comfortable with that, and that's why. And it's a learning curve for a lot of people.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So, can we dive a little bit deeper into these beliefs that we get oftentimes from our family of origin, right? Like
Mm.
the family that we grew up in, we inherit a lot of our own limiting beliefs from there, and also our core beliefs, like how we perceive ourselves in the world from our families. Can you speak a little bit to that? And also, how can we start shifting those beliefs? Because some of those don't really serve us, right? Like, for example,
Yes.
I always see myself as a kid sometimes because my parents treat me like a kid, right?
Yeah.
Even though, like, I'm well into my 30s now. But
Yeah.
that limiting belief, it also permeates into other areas when I'm making adult decisions. I'm like, oh, should I be making this decision on my own? Which I totally can and should because
Yeah.
it pertains to my life. But like those limiting beliefs, and there's lots of other ones, right?
Yeah.
That come into play. So can you speak a little bit to that?
Yeah, absolutely. This is a big part of my business. This was a big part of my own journey, figuring out my beliefs. And what I've learned professionally is that from the time we're born to the time we're about 7 years of age, that is called kind of like the imprint period, where how we're feeling and the experiences we have kind of remain inside at an unconscious level. And so if you were feeling a certain way, that kind of stays with you throughout your whole life. And we're not usually aware of that. And so I work with people who want to figure out those like unconscious beliefs because they do influence our behaviors and our decisions, no matter how old we are. What's really interesting is that, let's say we have an experience when we're younger and we're feeling like, I can't make this decision on my own, for example. Or for me, I know a big one was just not feeling enough, right?
Yeah, and mine stems from that too. I like the inadequacy of being able to make this decision
Yeah,
on my own. Yeah.
exactly. And so the mind actually kind of puts a pause on that memory. And so the reasons why we're reminded of childhood is because that belief hasn't been resolved. So every time it comes up, we have the same behaviors as we did when we were younger.
Mm.
And so I know specifically in relationships, people see this when they're not feeling enough or validated, they'll have a response that kind of almost mirrors like acting like a child, right? A little temper tantrum. And that's a normal response. It's just because at some level, on a conscious level, that belief hasn't been resolved yet. And so beliefs are part of being human, just like emotions. And like we are just talking about, a big one for a lot of people is just not feeling enough or confident or even lovable sometimes. And those stem from our childhood needs not being met. And so, some ways to get those needs met now is number one, to be aware of them because we could go our whole lifetimes and not be aware of our beliefs, right? Um, and so it's really about creating that inner dialogue and connectedness to ourselves so that we can have the awareness, number one. Number two, asking ourselves in those moments, what do I need right now? Right? Like in the moments of feeling not enough, it's like, okay, what do I need right now um, that will remind me of my worth? And sometimes we forget to ask ourselves what we need, and we just completely bypass that and go to, oh my gosh, like this is going to happen, and what if, and kind of catastrophizing
Mm.
or playing out in our minds a scenario that we don't want to happen. And so it's about catching ourselves before we do that. And even if we're, imagining the worst case scenario, it's about being mindful and reminding ourselves to stop. And I know this happens for a lot of people with anxiety. It's like, okay, like what will make me feel safe right now? And so these are strategies that not only have I done myself, but that I recommend to clients. It's amazing how powerful the mind is. And, you know, yes, beliefs, positive and negative, may come up at time to time in our lives, but it's figuring out how to navigate them and how to remind ourselves that they're just thoughts and they're not true, and getting back into an empowering place versus a powerless place because we do have the power to shift our thoughts. And that took me a long time to realize. And I know it sometimes takes a lot of people a little while to realize, but the mind wants direction, and when we give it direction, we can either give it um, attention and direction to something we don't want to happen or something that we do want to happen. And so I'll give you an example. Yesterday, I don't know what I was specifically doing, but I was aware of a limiting belief that came up, and I just kind of took a minute to myself, and I was playing in my mind something that I didn't want to happen. And a solution for this is to just step back and play the movie in your head as you want it to happen and really associate with it, which means see yourself in the picture. So that means feel the feelings of what it would feel like to have this go the way you want it to. And what are the thoughts that you're thinking? Maybe it's a bright visual, or maybe it's moving and all of these things, or maybe you're hearing things people are talking to you. Like, make it as real as possible, because the mind actually, when you visualize certain things or when you think about something, it can't tell what's real and what's not, right? And so the trick is to feed it things that are positive and that you want to happen. And this, like any new habit, creates time and is or takes time, and it's not easy right away. But the key is to being consistent with it and believing in yourself that you do have the ability to, um, make those decisions for yourself and choose what you want to believe versus, um, like all of those beliefs we were talking about before.
Mm.
So I
Yeah.
could talk about that all day.
Yeah, well, because our limiting beliefs, it's not like they completely disappear. It's we
No.
become, recognizing them and dealing with them. And I've
Mhm.
definitely found that with myself. It's so much easier to, if I'm going down, a thought thinking trap of some kind,
Yeah,
it's easier and easier for me, especially at certain times. So like if I'm really stressed out, it's harder for me to do. But
yeah,
if I'm taking good care of myself and it's my follicular phase of my menstrual
yeah,
cycle, it's easier to do those things versus like right before my period when my energy is a little bit lower and I'm like, oh, I'm
yeah,
just gonna ignore this for now and then deal with it
yeah,
later. But these things continue to come up. They don't like go away. It's just we become better at managing them. Like you said, we practice and we practice and
yeah.
we get better. And I've definitely found that with myself. It's so much easier to, like, if I'm going down that inadequacy, not feeling enough
Mhm.
in whatever, manner, then I can easily tap into, okay, let me just think of some evidence that doesn't support this thought that
Yeah,
I'm thinking, because I know it's not true. And
yeah,
and rationally, I think a lot of us do know it, but emotionally the story is
yeah,
completely different, right? Yeah. And then the other thing that you said that I really resonated with is that we forget to ask ourselves what we need, and we also forget to
mhm.
ask others what we need.
Yeah,
And I find that women, especially, and I might be biased because I see primarily women in my practice, but
yeah,
I find that women are not very good at doing that, like at just simply
mhm.
asking, because women also tend to be more intuitive. They will fill in the gaps wherever they see them, whereas a
Yeah,
lot of men need to be directed. And I know for myself in my personal relationships, I have to like ask my husband. He'll do it. He just needs to be asked, and he needs to be asked over
yeah,
and over and over again. So like every
yep,
time the laundry needs to be done, I have to ask him every single time. Or if
I
I even
know.
start like picking up the laundry basket, he's like, "Oh, here, let me do it." It just doesn't occur to them sometimes, right?
Yeah,
And that's the issue. So I find that that's so interesting that we're all wired so similarly to just ignore almost asking for what we
yeah,
need from ourselves and the other people in our lives.
yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Um, yeah, women are primarily givers too, right?
Yeah.
And so when we ask ourselves what we need, we're actually giving ourselves an opportunity to receive that, and that's sometimes hard for people.
Yeah.
Um, and then one other thing I want to touch on is, when we're going down the rabbit hole of um, thoughts or feelings, that's also okay too. And I think the key for me that I have learned is I'm allowed to feel those feelings, right? Like, I think that a lot of people are like, no, positivity all the time. And I am not one of those people. I am totally okay with being in my feelings and whatever way that looks like. The thing is now I put a time limit on that. So like you were saying, you took the weekend. It's like, okay, like this weekend or for the rest of this afternoon, I'm gonna allow myself to do whatever it is I want to do. And tomorrow's a new day. Or at 6 o'clock, I'm making dinner and then I'm gonna shift. So I think it's important for people to give themselves permission and just, it doesn't have to be the rest of your life to feel this way, but you can feel it for a certain amount of time and then you can have a new experience afterwards. So I really think it was great that you touched on that because it is
Yeah.
important.
Yeah, and I love that you mentioned that we have to sit with those emotions too. It's important
Mhm.
to work through those emotions or just feel those emotions. Like
Mhm.
the first week of COVID-19, I definitely took half a day and I I literally just cried for half a day on and off because that's what I
Mhm.
needed to do. That's what my body needed to do. My husband kept checking in on me. He's like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "Yes, I'm
You
okay.
know,
Just
that's so
need to get
cute.
it out." And then I did
Yeah.
it for half the day. Once I felt like, okay, I've gotten all the tears out. I have no more tears left. I went for a walk and then I worked because I felt like I was capable of working. I had gotten all those emotions. And
Mhm.
there's always so many emotions, right? It's not like most of us
Yeah.
just feel one emotion. With anger,
Yeah.
oftentimes there's irritability and then there's guilt because you yelled at your husband or yelled at this
Yeah.
other person or you didn't do all the things that you wanted to do because you're in this state of mind, and then there's anxiety. There's so
Mhm.
many emotions that come like this, right?
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
yeah, so feeling all of that is totally okay as long as, like you said, you have an exit strategy because you don't want to stay there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's get to some of the ways so we touched early on this a little bit. What are some of your favorite resources? What are your favorite ways of managing some of these pieces? So, like if we're feeling down or if we're feeling really anxious, how can we
Mhm.
manage that effectively? Apart from like obviously feeling it for a little bit and asking us for what we need, what other strategies can we use to process things and move through them?
Yeah. So, there's so many, and different ones work for different people. But one of the ones that I recommend to people is asking ourselves in those moments of anxiety or fear or guilt or whatever it is we're feeling, how we want the time to go. Like, how do we want to deal with this? Because I think we do the whole should, shouldn't thing. And when we ask ourselves, okay, like, you know, I'm feeling like I want to cry right now, or I'm feeling totally afraid, I'm having an anxiety attack. It's like we immediately just jump to different behaviors, and we it's awareness is a huge part of any kind of management. And so when we're asking ourselves, okay, like how do I want this time to go? Like what is it that I want to do right now? We get choice back. And so some different things that come to mind are people um, I think for me, just because I've studied self-esteem in school and creativity is a huge way to remind us to be present and to kind of just allow ourselves to be who we are without all the stuff. It's I don't know about you, but sometimes I will literally just get lost in things, and it's like nothing else matters. And this can be coloring for people. This can be singing. This could be sometimes for me, it's just going for a walk and just thinking about what I want. And the key to all of these things is that it actually just connects us back with us. Um, some resources that I love are um, podcasts. I love listening to podcasts. I love Brene Brown. Um,
Yeah.
and I love um, there's so many things that I love right now, but I love Brene Brown because she reminds us that it's okay to feel, number one, but also it reminds us that boundaries are important. And sometimes a resource for us, besides asking us what we need, is okay, what does my boundary circle, or what I like to call sacred circle, look like? And sometimes when our circles are um, a little violated, or people are pushing on our boundaries, it makes us feel all those big emotions. And so sometimes that can be asking our partners or lovers or children to do things for us that we need the time for ourselves. Sometimes it can be implementing things that we're not getting. Sometimes boundaries can be having a conversation with somebody about what's not working for us. And there's so many different kinds of boundaries, but the thing about the sacred circle I like is that it empowers us, number one, and we immediately start to get a sense of what's important to us and what feels good. And when we recognize what's not feeling good, we can ask ourselves these questions, and it's a way to develop that relationship to ourselves. And so I am all about self-connection. Um, I think that this world is so connected, yet we're so disconnected. And so all of the strategies that I've learned about in research are all pointing back to that. And when I think of mental health, it's kind of this huge umbrella. And under this umbrella is self care as a strategy. But I like to think of self care as its own umbrella. And there's all these different pieces to it, right? Everybody kind of intuitively does their own things. But the core of that is connection. And sometimes we don't even want to connect to ourselves. And that's when we distract ourselves, right? With the TV or social media or food or relationships and all of these things. So I like to remind people to give themselves permission to be brave enough to connect with themselves, and that it is a safe thing to do. And yeah, it really comes back to those strategies of asking ourselves, number one, what we need in that moment, but also giving ourselves permission to have control over how that goes. Um, Playing a positive movie in our mind of what we want instead of um, or what how we want things to go versus like how things might just go if we continue on the path that we're on. And so I'm a big believer in and yeah, and empowering yourself to use your brain. And as we know, when we think certain things, our body changes, like we feel it. And so affirmations are a great thing, but sometimes they take work. We're not going to say I am enough and then feel it right away, right? And so patience is key. And um, yeah, there's so many to touch on, and I kind of jumped from here and there and everywhere.
That's
But
okay. You made
yeah,
complete sense. You covered
okay,
a few
good. 'Cause
different,
I'm
yeah.
like,
You covered a few different strategies, and I love Brene Brown, and everyone I know loves Brene Brown too. And for
yeah,
that reason, right? We're allowed to be vulnerable and
yeah,
feel all the feels, and that's totally okay. And going back to that piece on creativity that you were saying, creativity can look like so many different things to different
yeah,
people. But tapping into that creative part of ourselves, it's actually a form of like mindfulness and meditation, right?
yeah.
Because like that's exactly kind of what I did this weekend. I hadn't sewed in a long time, and I
Okay,
one
yeah.
of the things I love doing is taking old clothes and like upcycling them.
Oh,
so,
cool. I love that.
so I did some upcycling, and like I felt so amazing afterwards. And part of that is
Yeah,
just like it's monotonous, right? Like, and I was hand stitching. Hand stitching works better for me than just like sewing with a machine. It's like
yeah,
hand stitching because like you're using your hands, you're using your mind. It's like quiet, and
yes.
it was so therapeutic. And I think that was a big factor in me feeling better this week.
Mhm.
And it also allows you to just like quiet your mind and be like, okay, what am I feeling? Let's just be present.
Yeah,
I love that you touched on that so many times because we need to hear it so many times.
yeah. It's like, and what people forget about creativity is that it's totally intuitive, right? Like it's unique to you, like you said, but it absolutely does quiet the mind. And um, yeah, it's a huge part of my life now. It does empower us. It's kind of like that pause button that we need, and then after that, we choose what we're going to do um, and how we want the rest of our day to go, or whatever the and yeah, it's very empowering, actually.
For sure, yeah. And like you said, it can look like different things. For some people, it's cooking, music,
Yeah, cooking.
walking, art,
Mhm.
dance. It could even be like
Yeah.
other kinds of movement. Um,
Even
and
what you want to wear. Like
so
people think
true.
creativity is like so like just art, and no, not limited to that. Everybody has
Yeah.
creative inside of them, and
Yeah,
yeah.
even just like changing things around in the house or your
Yeah,
makeup or your
absolutely.
hair. There's so many avenues
Yeah.
of doing that for sure. All right,
Yeah,
Ali, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it, and I'm
absolutely.
sure my audience does as well. So, where can people find you if they want to connect with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So right now I am on Instagram, just my name, Alison Foy. And I have always done this, and I will continue to do this. But if you're interested in connecting with me, I offer free connection calls. Um, because especially now, I like we're connecting right now. I'm loving it. It's filling my cup. And sometimes we just need someone to talk to. And so I've always offered that. So if you're wanting to connect with me, I'd be honored to. So find me on Instagram. I also am on Facebook. And if you're a parent watching this and want to be part of my parent Facebook group, where we actually just started it not too long ago, um, I work with another woman who does similar things that I do. We run youth workshops for youth who are wanting to really tap into these strategies and skills and create confidence and just life skills as they move forward and grow up. So we co-facilitate that, but we're also co-facilitating this parent group where it's really just a space for parents to connect, um, parents to get advice if they need or just a listening ear. We also have guest speakers that we're throwing in, so we're talking about different topics. Um, but it's really important right now for parents who are especially like in total overwhelm with having all the roles that they have to do. And so, yeah, I'm happy to connect with anybody who wants more information on those platforms. Um, but yeah, I'm grateful for the opportunity and hopefully, you know, everything slows down in the next few weeks. We get some sense of normalcy and routine a bit. I know they just announced that we'll be here for another month, but hopefully this has helped some people. And yeah, it was great talking to you.
Likewise, and I'll throw those links to connect with you in the description for the video. Thanks so
Yeah,
much again,
perfect.
Ali, and have a good day.
Thanks, you too. Bye, everyone.